Hey there, I'm Lori, the founder of Brand Strength, and I help service providers strengthen their brand so they can make more impact and more money. In this video, we're going to be talking about the difference between your branding and your brand. In my experience, a lot of people spend more time on one of these things than the other, but it's not the right one. Come on back in a second and I'll tell you what I'm talking about. In this video, we're going to talk about the difference between your branding and your brand. Now, one of those things is pretty easy to nail down, and one of those things takes a little bit more effort. But I've noticed that a lot of people switch those two around. They spend more time on the thing they should be spending less time on, and less time on the thing they should be spending more time on. So let's first define what's the difference between your branding and your brand. So your branding is how people recognize you and your business visually. Okay, we're talking about your color palette, your logo, your fonts, the way things look aesthetically, either on your site or in anything that you produce. That's your branding. What your brand is how people recognize you and your business experientially, or how they feel when they're doing business with you, talking with you, using materials that you've created, and so on and so forth. Now, the brand part is much more important, but a lot of people spend a lot of their time and energy on the branding part. Now, I'm not saying that your branding isn't important at all. It definitely is. And the most important thing about your branding is that it's consistent and it's readable. That's really it. That's all you need to focus on when you're thinking and working with your branding, okay? It needs to be readable. It needs to be consistent. As long as you're doing those two things with your branding, you have put enough effort into it. So you do need to have your logo with a color palette and fonts chosen. Now, fonts can fall in different categories, right? There's serif, which is the letters that have a little bit of decoration. Some people call it a serif. I call it a serif. Then you have sans serif. Sans means without. So those are fonts that don't have the decorations. Like, think of like a T. So a sans serif font is just going to be the line at the top and the vertical line going up and down. That's it. With a serif font, you're going to have the little things that make the decorations at the bottom of the T and at the top of the line. So you've got serif and sans serif, and then you've got like a signature or like a script font or something that's a little bit more cursive and flowy. Now, there are not always times when you can use a signature like script font in things that you're doing. So you need to make sure that you're either using a serif or a sans serif in all of your other branding so that you can at least maintain the consistency of that style of font. Now, what I mean by that is that you might find the exact font that's within your branding in use on something like Canva or some other online program where you can actually pick the font that you've used in your branding. But there are other programs where you can't pick that exact font. So I'm thinking like MailChimp has very few options that you can use to choose from when you're writing any kind of content within MailChimp. But if you stay at least within the family, so if you've chosen a serif font for your branding and you're using a serif font in like the body or the headings of your website and the things that you create, then use a serif font in other places. If your specific font that you've chosen isn't available, you can at least stick with that same family. So as long as you maintain your consistency there and people can see and understand what your logo says and means, then you're all good with branding and you can put that aside. Now, your brand is much more complex. This is something that you need to spend time working on so that you can elevate the level that you're serving people and make sure that they feel as good as they possibly can while they're in the experience of working with you. And that is what your brand is. Now, that does take time and effort, and it's not necessarily easy to do, but there are simple ways that you can increase the value of your brand and the way it makes people feel. If you haven't already downloaded my freebie, go ahead and download it. You can see it below. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Making More Money in Your Service-Based Business. So if you are a service provider and you want to elevate your brand so that you're offering more value, which means you're helping people get a better result and therefore can charge higher prices, you're going to want to go ahead and grab that guide. So go ahead and click below and grab The Ultimate Guide to Making More Money in Your Service-Based Business. I hope this video was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you back in another episode.